everybody. Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here. And tonight I will continue my countdown on my list of top 25 most interesting players in Minnesota Vikings training camp. If you missed the previous episodes, feel free to go back and watch them. Also, doing writing on this list as well over at the newsletter, purpleinsider.football, which just going to throw it out there, might be worth checking out, especially when we get to training camp time. So I'll start the list in just a minute, but I also wanted to begin with something that I've seen a lot of in Vikings land, just as it regards to lists in general. I saw that PFF put out a list of their top coaches in the NFL, and their top 10 did not include Minnesota Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell, which I think we all can pretty easily agree is insane and makes no sense that the coach of the year from last year wouldn't crack the top 10. And that I believe on the same list, Mike Tomlin was in the top 5, which I think that he is squarely fallen out of that list. And the most wacky of that list was number 10, which was Kevin Stefanski, whose team won 3 games last year. And all of that is just crazy. But two things that I want to throw out there about that. Number one is, as I get ready to count down part of a list of mine, and I'm also doing a bold predictions list, things like that, is just that we can't take list season too seriously. Embrace list season, have fun with list season. Don't waste your time. It's almost July 4th here, a little bit of an ugly weather day. So maybe today you wanted to stay inside and be angry, but just in general, it's not time to be upset about things regarding the Minnesota Vikings, no matter what somebody says. If somebody ranks your quarterback 25th because they just don't believe in JJ, like it doesn't make any difference for the season. We're all just making lists and having fun. And also, I saw a lot of this is why no one takes PFF seriously. And of course, as the person who wrote the book right over my left shoulder here about PFF, it's just one guy who works at PFF's opinion. It's not the opinion of the entire company, and it's not all their data thrown together to make this decision. And they've had a lot of their top people over the last few years, and it's in the book why, leave PFF. And I think some of the people who they're leaning on are learning on the job. So I don't think that it's worth wasting your time getting too upset. But if we were making a list of the top coaches in the NFL and including KOC, this is what I wanted to ask you guys. We could start a conversation about this after I run through my list, and any other questions, comments. I wonder where you guys would put Kevin O'Connell on a head coach's list in the NFL, because the thing that I struggle with making a list of quarterbacks or coaches is there's context to every single situation. And Kevin O'Connell has this guy. He wears number 18. He's very, very good at football. And that helps him be a quarterback whisperer. If Kevin O'Connell had to play 17 games without Justin Jefferson, maybe he'd whisper less, right? And that goes for everybody all time. It goes for Bill Walsh having Jerry Rice and, having Joe Montana. You have to have the guys who can execute what you're asking them to do. So isolating coaching is so difficult. There's also not an equal gap. And this has always been one of my issues with this kind of exercise is there's not an equal gap between number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. It's not an equal standard deviation. So the number 1 coach is X number of points better than the number 2 coach, or the number 1 quarterback, X number of points. It's easier to probably say that about quarterbacks, but for coaches, how would we even begin to figure that out? So what I have generally done in the past, but I am curious about where you guys would put O'Connell, just if it was a 1 to 10 ranking, if we were doing this and not taking ourselves too seriously or getting too angry, where would you put him? I've always thought of the coach conversation as more of in buckets. So there's coaches, there's like the OG guys who they know what they're doing. They've won in the league before. They're sort of knighted as great NFL coaches. And that would be like Andy Reid, Mike Tomlin, Pete Carroll's back, everybody. I'll throw him in that list as well. They've won Super Bowls. They've had lots of success year after year. And we have a big enough sample size to be able to say, all right, Sean Payton, you may not like him, but he's a really good NFL coach. And then there's this next level, which I feel like is the where KOC would land. And this is the younger coaches who are still looking to really prove that they deserve to be knighted. And O'Connell, but they've shown a lot, like Matt LaFleur, Kevin O'Connell, even Kyle Shanahan's not really younger at this point, but hasn't won a Super Bowl. I think actually Kyle Shanahan's probably in the OG list at this point as a head coach because he's been doing it long enough and was such a great offensive coordinator. But maybe you throw him in that list. There's a group that hasn't quite got over the hump, but they're very, very good. And you go into every season saying, all right, like because the Vikings are coached by Kevin O'Connell or because the Packers are coached by Matt LaFleur, you know that they're going to be competitive. You know they're going to have good game plans. You're not going to just roll into Green Bay and outcoach them and stomp them and run away from them, that kind of thing. But at the same time, neither Matt LaFleur or Kevin O'Connell has a Super Bowl. O'Connell doesn't have playoff wins yet. You can't start saying, okay, well, no, he's definitely better than Andy Reid or someone like that. But coaches that clearly elevate their talent or get the most out of their talent and then run teams efficiently and effectively behind the scenes, which eventually, if you're not, it will come out that you're not, or you'll get fired and no one will hire you and et cetera, if you're not creating a good culture behind the scenes. So O'Connell checks a lot of boxes as next wave coaches. They're going to be here a long time. They're not going to get fired. They're going to, compete for championships every single year. There's a handful of those guys. And then there's coaches who have been around a while that I don't think are that good. Give you an example. And it's not that Todd Bowles is a bad coach. It's just that I don't think he's really a needle mover, for example. And if you have Tom Brady, then you could probably win a lot of games. And if you don't have a great roster, you're probably a 10-win team at best with him. But he's been around a long time because he is a pretty good coach, but not good enough. And then there's a lot of coaches that are either about to get fired or are just hoping to keep their jobs in the league or are so new that we can't judge yet. So I kind of put them into those buckets. And I think O'Connell is very clearly in that, hey, if things go right for him, he can end up like Sean Payton. He can end up like Andy Reid if things work out. If you've drafted the right quarterback, if you get the right breaks in the playoffs, say Adrian Peterson fumbles and then there's 12 men in a huddle and then you get a Super Bowl or something like that. It always has to go that way as well. So that's kind of how I think of it. But if we were doing just a top 10, that style of list that I don't love, I might put him 6, somewhere in that range, between 6 and 10. You have a coach who clearly elevates quarterbacks, which is the most important thing in the sport. There may be some blind spots that he's still working out. There may be more experience that needs to go, especially in the postseason. But somewhere between 6 and 8, I think is where I would put him. I would definitely not put a coach who won 3 games last year ahead of Kevin O'Connell. So let me know. And questions, comments, thoughts. What do you guys want to hear about? What do you want to talk about? I'll get to my list here and throw them in the comment section. You can react as well to my most interesting Viking list. So let's dive into that. Number 15 on my list of 25. Again, we've been counting him down on the show here, is cornerback Jeff Okudah. So I was looking up Jeff Okudah's previous statistics in the NFL, and I got to say, it's not a pretty PFF sheet of statistics. This is a former number 3 overall draft pick in 2020, and in his rookie year had a 42.5 PFF grade, which is what you would expect if you just put in a random special teamer or if you pulled somebody up off the practice squad. Like, that's the type of performance. And then he's got 2 other full seasons, 59.4 and 50.5, which is replacement level play. So that's the type of performance you'd expect from just a regular backup if you played them for the entire season. And to make it a little more understandable, rather than just talk about the grade, when targeting Jeff Okudah in his career, opposing quarterbacks have a 106.3 quarterback rating, which is basically like playing like a top 5 quarterback when they have targeted Jeff Okudah. So there is a reason that somebody this highly regarded coming out of the draft a couple of years ago was available for a song this offseason, because there is not any previous performance to look at and say, okay, well, you can see the flashes. I mean, last year, even with Sam Darnold, like I remember doing an article on Sam Darnold where one of the, after I had written 700 words or something, I got to this point and said, well, this is how you start to believe in Sam Darnold, because there were at least flashes, there were streaks, there were moments for him and statistics where, hey, if he's running play action, hey, if he's got a clean pocket, hey, if he's got the right coaching, like maybe it can work. With Okudah, there isn't much to lean on with that statistically. And that includes a lot of penalties over his career. He's only got 2 interceptions and 10 pass breakups in almost 2,000 career snaps. He's been penalized 13 times. So you don't want to have more penalties than pass breakups, but that's what he's got. The only real thing that you can look at with Okudah that you could see mattering with the Minnesota Vikings is that I think his size plays into this. Very good tackling grades, very good run defense grades. And sometimes when it comes to coverage, it might just depend on what type of coverage you're being asked to play. When Okudah came out in the draft, he was supposed to be like, this guy is the next Darrelle Revis. He's going to lock down top guys. He's going to go to battle with the best wide receivers. And then the league changed. Teams started using motion way more. They started using bunch sets way more. That made it a lot more challenging for anybody to be Darrelle Revis in the shutdown corner. I mean, Darrelle Revis still would be great no matter what era you put him in. But most cornerbacks, most players in the NFL are not like that. A lot of times, how they're used will dictate that. And if Brian Flores' defense, which is a lot of rally to the football type of defense, where you're playing in a zone and you're trying to get the opposing team to throw underneath, and then you're rushing to make a tackle. Like, he could be effective in that type of role. But my question is, for a guy who's always been asked to just lock down, is he going to be able to adapt to playing in a system that basically says read route combinations, be in the right spot, communicate extremely well, and then read and react? That's what it seems to ask this to do. Can he follow along with Byron Murphy's direction? And can he rally to the football, but also be in the right spot to rally to the football? Can he make plays on the ball when it comes his way? Because we really saw that from Murphy last year, where if there was a mistake, if there was an underthrow, or if there was a route combination that they recognized from their preparation, he was undercutting it and picking it off. We saw him do that against the Indianapolis Colts. And then he took advantage of mistakes that quarterbacks under pressure made, like Kirk Cousins tossing up a ball into the atmosphere and Byron Murphy picking it off. If you can do those things, if you could be in the right place, if you can make plays on the football when you get a chance, and then if you can tackle, you have a shot at hanging around in Brian Flores' defense. So what it might come down to for Jeff Okudah is just how well he understands it. And I'm intrigued enough to be patient and see what comes of it. If Jeff Okudah is serviceable for this team, that means you have decent depth with him and Dwight McGlothern and a couple of guys battling for spots behind him. If Okudah goes the way of, say, Jawan Williams, who was a former fairly high draft pick, huge guy that they brought in, and it just never worked out, then the depth is pretty concerning. You got, Ambry Thomas, a couple other guys that are battling for spots, but nobody that you feel really good about if they are to get in the game. So Jeff Okudah is a bit of a swingman for this cornerback unit. And I think that he's somebody that the team is going to be watching really, really closely, because they have to make a decision at some point. Like, do you want to bring in another cornerback? Do you want to go out into that free agent market and try to bring somebody in or not? And Okudah will be a player that determines that. So he's number 15. Number 14 is a very different side of the spectrum. That is defensive tackle slash DN. We're not really sure yet. Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins out of Georgia, fairly productive last season in a situational role in college. This guy played all over the line of scrimmage on defense. And sometimes there's a bit of a master of none type of thing with, if you played all these positions in college football, were you really that good? Because usually if someone's really that good, they just play defensive end and sack a bunch of people. But at the same time, this is Brian Flores' defense. He asks these players to move all over the place, play outside, play inside, rush from the linebacker position sometimes, even for big guys. So Ingram-Dawkins is intriguing because he is a ridiculous athlete on paper. at the NFL Combine, totally crushed it. And then, we had a couple minutes with him after he was drafted and then heard this as well, just about high intelligence player, like very, very bright guy. And in Flores' defense, athleticism, intelligence, versatility, if these things come together, you can have something interesting. And the interior D line battle now kind of includes you call them five techniques if you really want to get football-y, but that just means the guy, defensive tackle, kind of lines up over the offensive tackle. And then the outside linebackers are much more in a traditional outside linebacker position. Like, could Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins be a traditional 3-4 defensive end? He's kind of built that way where you're getting upfield, but also you have to stick blocks and things like that. Maybe. And that battle is open behind Jonathan Allen, behind Javon Hargrave. You have Jalen Redmond, you got Taki Taimani, you got Levi Drake Rodriguez. Like, there's guys there, but it's not like there's proven guys there. There is opportunity for Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins to prove himself right away and carve out a role. Now, my expectation, I think theirs is as well, is that he's going to need development. I mean, he just hasn't played a whole lot of college football. But in Flores' system, we've just seen this enough times where if somebody does something well, he's going to find a spot for that person. And maybe Ingram-Dawkins can carve out some sort of role. Now, maybe some of you who listen every day, you might call me hypocritical here for this next guy on the list, because you've probably heard me say, hey, this backup quarterback situation, I don't really want to talk about it. Don't really care about it. JJ McCarthy is the dude, and it's all about JJ McCarthy. However, Sam Howell, you're number 13 on the list. You are a top 15 most interesting player at Minnesota Vikings training camp. I have to be fair. It's true that behind JJ McCarthy right now is a guy who has won only a couple games in the NFL, is not that old, not that experienced. And when he was in Seattle as a backup quarterback, can't say that it worked out very well. He had a stretch in Washington where he was pretty good, but that's really all he has to hold his hat on, is maybe a 6 or 8 game stretch where he was a pretty good quarterback, and the rest was a disaster with a disaster franchise that was selling off parts and was changing ownership and was tanking and was getting Jaden Daniels and all that sort of stuff. It wasn't a good situation for Sam Howell, but was it really situation based, or was it more of, Sam Howell not being that great? I think we're going to find that out. I did not want to be very judgy in minicamp and OTAs because Sam Howell just got here. He has not been with his team for a couple of years. It's not like he's experienced in this offense. So he's having to learn it on the fly. And as Kevin O'Connell seemed fairly happy with how things went in OTAs and minicamp, but you're still talking about last year, for example, when McCarthy was learning it on the fly, it looked pretty ugly. And even Sam Darnold, I don't think it really clicked in through halfway through training camp. So there's a lot to learn from this offense with Kevin O'Connell. And I want to give Sam Howell time in training camp before we start getting overly judgmental and see him in preseason games as well. But it's Sam Howell v. Sam Howell for that number 2 spot. If he makes progress and he looks good and looks like somebody that could start if you needed him to, you might have something here as a backup quarterback. And if McCarthy were to miss a couple games, you might feel good about it. But you could also walk out of training camp feeling very bad about it, or feeling like, oh man, they need to go out to the trade market or pick up someone else or use Max Brosber as the backup or something. So there's a wide range of outcomes regarding Sam Howell, which is what lands him on this list. And yes, we will be mostly watching and tracking JJ McCarthy in training camp. That is goal A1 every single day. And during training camp, by the way, this is a reason to subscribe and set some alerts for the show. During training camp, after every single practice, I will be right here live streaming, breaking down what happened in the practice that day. And I have not, I think I missed one. I think I've missed one training camp practice since 2017 was my first training camp. So I'll be there for sure. And we'll be breaking it down, also doing interviews from out there and everything else. It'll be a grand old time. But the point is that, when we're not tracking JJ McCarthy, we will also keep close track of Sam Howell, which is why he's on the list. Number 12 was a hero of training camp last year. One of the best training camps from a backup player that I can remember, and that was Theo Jackson. He was making plays on the ball left and right at training camp, and then he gets into the game, and lo and behold, gets an interception against Seattle. He had done it the year before against Philadelphia when he had to come into the game, and I think the team feels very confidently about Theo Jackson. But here is my question: is Theo Jackson Cam Bynum, or is he something else? Is he more of a rotation player where possibly they have Josh Metellus playing more traditional safety so they can get Dallas Turner on the field more often? There's a lot of moving parts to this thing. And they also have Eric Wilson, who we know can play, and you can have him into a role where he's rotating in. Like, they have a lot of pieces, which may push Theo Jackson out of the every single play type of role that we saw from Cam Bynum. That is a guess, though, because I want to see what it looks like in training camp. We want to get a sense for, is he the Cam Bynum? Is he really a starter? Is he the guy who's going to be playing every single down? Or is it more of a nickel safety type of situation where Metellus would move up into the box in those nickel spots? How's it going to work with Theo Jackson? And is it going to work with Theo Jackson? I mean, we have mostly just assumed that it will because history suggests that it should. Go back to the history of, your Andrew Sendejo, your Anthony Harris, your Cam Bynum. So many of these guys have showed up and played really well next to Harrison Smith that why wouldn't we be saying now, all right, well, next man up? And the way that Harrison Smith talked about Theo Jackson, where he kind of made fun of the Tennessee Titans for getting rid of him and said, like, why did you guys get rid of Theo Jackson? And the way that the coaches have talked about him. I talked to Durante Jones last year. Again, you can read these articles at the newsletter, purpleinsider.football. But I talked to Durante Jones, the defensive backs coach last year, about Theo Jackson for an article on Theo. And he said that they had what they called is kind of the four horsemen of the safety room, where it was Harrison Smith, obviously, Josh Metellus, obviously, and Cam Bynum, and also Theo Jackson. He said, like, they all sit next to each other in the meeting room and they communicate and they ask questions and they have feedback. So behind the scenes, this team has loved what they've seen from Theo Jackson, but will we love it again in training camp is why he is number 12 on my most interesting players list. And number 11, now this is a little bit of a hard one because the player and his intrigue kind of outweighs what I know we can see at training camp. So with a running back, it is kind of hard because he's not actually running over people, but we could get the sense for how they're going to use Jordan Mason and what they think of him. He is number 11 on the list, former 49er. They make the trade for him. I think it was a really, really good move in the offseason to give a thunder and lightning element to this Vikings backfield. How much is he going to really play in training camp and preseason? I don't know, but he's still interesting nonetheless because he brings such a different dynamic from what we've seen before to this backfield. This was supposed to be Alex Madison. Didn't really work out that way. Madison and Chandler, they were supposed to be that in 2023. Just didn't happen. Delvin Cook was more speed than violence at the end of his time in Minnesota. And in 2022 with Kevin O'Connell, I just remember the number of times that he ran out of bounds rather than taking contact because he was dealing with injuries. This is going to be the most physical runner since Adrian Peterson to play for the Minnesota Vikings. What does that look like? And where does he fit in will be very interesting at training camp. And then, we'll see a lot more when we get into the real season, but we'll be watching close for Jordan Mason. So there it is. Number 15 through number 11, Jeff Okudah, Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, Sam Howell, Theo Jackson, and Jordan Mason. The top 10 will be revealed next week. Very excited about that, along with more predictions. If you missed my show with Steve Palazzolo, we started in the 50 bold predictions list, which I'm having a lot of fun with and looking at that. So, all right, questions, comments, thoughts, feelings. Who are you interested in, and where would you put Kevin O'Connell on your top 10 list? Because Vikings fans were big mad that PFF did not have him there. Dustin says, I hope Jeff Okudah shines in this defense. I still, until proven otherwise, I still have Jeff Okudah in that category of the Ross Blacklocks and other players that the Vikings have brought in. You guys can remind me of some of them that were former first or second round draft picks. I mentioned Juwan Williams, that if multiple teams have passed on them, there's probably a reason why. But that doesn't guarantee that it's over. It's just that the odds of something like this, even bringing in Rondale Moore, once you have had your chance in the league with a couple of different teams, and Moore got hurt, so maybe it's not a great example, but once you've had your shot with a couple of different teams and it doesn't work out, the percentages that you suddenly become something different than you've ever been before with the Minnesota Vikings because they're special is not super high. But the thing that's a little bit different about the Vikings is just how they play. And I wrote about this the other day about uniqueness in the Vikings offense and defense. And we can go on paper and we can look at these percentages of how often they play zone defense, how often they blitz, and we can see that the Vikings play differently than other teams, which at least opens the door for someone like Jeff Okudah that his physicality and his size might play to his advantage enough that it could potentially fit here. It's a hard one to see because the history is so poor. And when you're talking about someone this talented, they're going to get lots of shots with lots of different teams, and it just hasn't stuck. And a lot of times, a player like this who is so physically gifted during OTAs and minicamp, they usually look pretty good because obviously they're in shorts and not pads, and it's not physical at all. So, hey, if you're a physical freak, if you're an athletic freak, you're going to stand out pretty good in that situation. But what they would know that I don't is what about the mental part? The mental part for Jeff Okudah could be a huge part of it. I don't know that any team has leaned into the mental part for Okudah because his reputation was so much as a shutdown and a lockdown type of corner. Has anybody asked him to be consistently playing as a zone and be physical and tackle people type of player? That I don't know. WV Walker says, what if everything works this year? How good are we? So by everything, I mean, we have to talk about the definition of everything. I mean, sometimes we have seen seasons before where everything goes right. 2017 was probably that, but even then, like they lost their quarterback and they lost their running back early in the season, and then everything went right after that. The schedule was pretty easy. They won their one-score games. Like, was it Detroit blocked a field goal, but they were offside that would have maybe won a game on Thanksgiving, possibly in 17? They did have a lot go right in that season, including the Minneapolis Miracle. And 2022 was kind of the same way, where every last second situation and the health of the team was very good. Last year, the health of the team was very good. Sam Darnold, you couldn't have asked for anything better from him. That was kind of an everything goes right, and still some stuff went wrong. It's impossible for everything to go right. Even last year in a 14-win season, you have Christian Darrisaw lost for the year, and you have the worst possible matchup. And it just so happens that another team gets 15 wins. So you have to go on the road in the playoffs. Like even the best of the best years, something still goes wrong. So let's say, when you say everything, let's say 90% of stuff goes right. They're healthy. The older players that they brought in, those guys don't have any issues and they play at like 80% of what they used to be, which is still really, really good. How good can the Vikings be? And yes, it does go back to the best version that's reasonably projectable from JJ McCarthy. If we are reasonably projecting, when you say everything goes right, well, of course, if he becomes Peyton Manning, you win the Super Bowl. But if everything goes right in, let's say, the 80th, 90th percentile outcome for JJ McCarthy in a good way, I mean, you should be winning the division and you should be going into the divisional round with a chance to potentially go to the Super Bowl. The offense and defense and the coaching are that good around JJ McCarthy. And if he is good enough to put himself in the top 15 of NFL quarterbacks, which I think is a reasonable goes right scenario, then you should have that chance. And the more that I've thought about the schedule, the more I've thought, I know that it is difficult, it is challenging, but what game on the schedule are you going into saying, oh, well, they can't compete with that team. That team's way better than them, top to bottom. They're never going to be able to go to battle. I mean, in the past, we've looked at matchups in a lot of different ways, depending on the Vikings' strength. But hey, this team has a tough defensive line. They've got no chance. That happened a lot, didn't it? And yet, you know, now they bought an offensive line interior and drafted in part. So that might not be the case. How they stop the run could be a big element of it. How they go against some of the best running quarterbacks, which we haven't seen them have to do, that's going to be some of it. But who in the league could they go against on their schedule where you thought, nah, they just don't have any chance whatsoever? I fail to see that team on this schedule, and Philly's coming here. You're not going to Philadelphia. If they were going to Philly, I'd probably say that's going to be pretty darn tough. But they match up really, really well with every team from top to bottom. It's just that we don't know as much about the quarterback. So we're looking at the schedule saying, yes, it is difficult. It is challenging. They shouldn't win 14 games. They shouldn't win 15 games. But if everything goes right, then they're in that conversation for 11, 12, 13, and playing for the NFC North. AJ says, hate to say this, but if all else fails, we'll bring back Kirk Cousins. Like I said, hate to say it. I think the Cousins thing, like, I get it. And I don't think KOC would be against it. I mean, he has a really good relationship with Kirk Cousins. And if Cousins has accepted at this point, no one out there is making him their starter, but also not a good time to retire with, the money situation. He's got to get his guaranteed dollars. Did he already get them? Maybe he already got them. I don't know. I haven't studied that contract, but just he doesn't want to retire. He wants to keep playing in the league. He wants to be in a position where he could start. I think it's best for Kirk Cousins to wait and hang on to that no trade clause until some other quarterback in the league gets hurt. Because you saw this from the Philadelphia Eagles with Sam Bradford and Carson Wentz. Exact same situation. Bradford was unhappy. He was getting benched for Carson Wentz. They draft Wentz, which he didn't expect, I think. And I don't know why he wouldn't have expected it at the time, but Kirk was pretty shocked by Michael Penix and all that. And then what happened was, of course, Teddy Bridgewater got hurt and the Vikings had to go and trade a first round pick for Sam Bradford. Now, nobody's trading a first round pick for Kirk Cousins. Maybe we've gotten older and wiser at this point, and there's contract stuff to be regarded there. But if you're a team that's competing and you have your quarterback get hurt, there's a guy that's right there that's really obvious that should be able to give you a shot. I still also think it's possible that the Cleveland Browns have 2 weeks of training camp and are like, oh my gosh, we're all getting fired if Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett is our quarterback and these other two guys aren't ready, and just make the phone call and try to get Kirk Cousins. So there's other teams that are out there that could do it. There's injury potential, but I don't think that it's the most insane thing I've ever heard that if the Vikings really didn't like how it was going with Sam Howell, that they could consider bringing Kirk in. I just think it's so awkward. I just think it's so uncomfortable. And, you've got a young quarterback who's trying to really establish himself with the guy who was the franchise quarterback here for years. It's just, I can't think of too many situations where that's ever happened before. You'd probably rather have somebody one notch down in terms of talent. I think Kirk can still throw the ball and just not have that dynamic there, because a lot of the players in the locker room, Kirk was their leader for multiple years. And now you're going to say, like, all right, well, actually it's JJ, but Kirk is back, but he's here, but don't look at him. Don't look directly at him. Like, I don't know. That's just kind of uncomfortable to me. Ryan says Howell has Nick Mullins written all over him, and that is not a bad thing. Well, the one thing about Nick Mullins that I don't know about Sam Howell, because I just don't know Sam Howell yet. I got to know Nick Mullins over a couple years. A go-to guy in the locker room, one of the smartest football minds that you're going to run into. He knows this sport inside and out. He has a freakish mind for the game. And he puts so much work into it, and he's so appreciated in the locker room because of that, because he's running scout team. And look, I mean, he came very close to winning them games when he actually got a chance, and he aired it out. And I think everybody appreciated that, how much heart he put into it. You saw how emotional he was after it didn't work out. Does Sam Howell have the mind and the heart of Nick Mullins? I mean, I would put Nick Mullins, and this is why I always, balked when people talked about him. He's not a great quarterback. And I think that he would tell you that also, that he's not, Peyton Manning, he's not Josh Allen or anything like that. But a lot of times these backup quarterbacks, the way that they're in the league, is that they're so prepared and they will fight to the very last second to try to win, even if they're not good enough to actually do it. And there's a lot of great journeymen, your Ryan Fitzpatrick, your Josh McCown, who stay in the league because they know they're going to be able to run the offense and they know they're a fighter and they're a leader and they're going to go give everything they've got. I don't know if Sam Howell's that guy or not. I'm not saying he isn't. I just don't know that yet. That he hasn't been around long enough to have a bunch of proof to say that he is. If he's that guy, if he can take all the great things about Nick Mullins and make those about Sam Howell, he's going to be in the league a long time and he's going to have a lot of jobs and he's going to have some opportunities. That would be great for him if he's got that heart and mind to go along with it like Nick Mullins did. Because that's why they went and got Nick Mullins for Jacksonville, right? Not because they thought, oh yeah, if Trevor Lawrence goes down for 8 games, we're going to win 4 of them. No, because they want him in the room with Trevor Lawrence. Son of a Beaver says Theo Jackson was part of the 2022 draft Titans. So a safety from that class did end up getting a contract extension. Fun fact of the day. That's right, because they got Theo Jackson when Lewis Cine got hurt in London. So there's a trickle down effect here, a domino effect of if Theo Jackson becomes a Wall of Fame Minnesota Viking player who, challenges Paul Krause's all-time record for interceptions or something, they'll have gotten him because a first-round pick went down. And it's the safety version of Brock Purdy and Trey Lance, the athletic freak who's drafted high and basically never plays, and then the late-round draft pick. Look, this is a point that I've made many times, and that actually is really funny that you bring that up, because let's like reverse engineer if they had found. Now I know Ivan Pace. So Ivan Pace was a rookie in 23, not 22. So I guess this doesn't quite work. But if you got Jalen Naylor, Theo Jackson, if I don't remember the undrafted free agents from that list, but it's just sort of like, what if Theo Jackson was the first round pick and worked out to be pretty good and started and got an extension? Then maybe we wouldn't look at that draft as being so bad. But yeah, I mean, who you can actually count as like Josh Metellus, because Josh Metellus probably doesn't get an opportunity if Lewis Cine had worked out. So they got Josh Metellus, a top hybrid player in the league, and Theo Jackson, a starting safety, because one player could not get on the field. So there you go. And it's always not if you hit on the draft picks as much as what do you do about the failures? Jude says, how much do you think McCarthy is going to play in the 3 preseason games? I've been thinking about that a lot, about how Kevin O'Connell is going to handle it. If I had to wager a guess right now, I would say that they will play JJ McCarthy for maybe 3 or 4 series in the first game. And that will probably be it. Maybe 1 series in the second game, depending on how it goes. But they have joint practices, and those joint practices are just those are the real preseason games. And that's why I want to make it my thing that they should have joint practices inside the stadium before a preseason game. I don't know how it would work out, but this is my idea for all teams. If you're having a joint practice, which means you're not going to play your starters in your preseason game, you should have that practice in the stadium that people can buy their tickets, come in, watch the joint practice, and then stay for the actual game. Because if you're buying a ticket to the Vikings preseason game and you're not seeing JJ McCarthy or Justin Jefferson or Jordan Addison or TJ Hawkinson or all these star talents, I mean, maybe you're watching this show, so maybe you're super into whether Taki Taimani is going to work out or not. But to not see any of them, that's why I always suggest, because usually they do warm-ups. I usually suggest, if people ask me, hey, what should I, I'm coming to this preseason game, what should I do? What should I see? I always suggest, make sure you show up super early so you can watch the warm-ups and actually see the players that you like. But anyway, that's a side rant. But I would guess, I'm going to guess 5 series. Maybe that's an over-under if you guys want to answer that. How many series should he play? I'll guess 5. I think that you get him in the first game, you get him rolling around a little bit, making some plays. Hey, you're back in a real football stadium, so it's not going to be the first time you're doing that when you arrive at the regular season. And maybe the second game, just to go through the process, just to treat it like another game. Maybe he starts it, runs a series, but mean, last year he got hurt in a preseason game. Don't want too much of that action. And I'll always think, when it comes to KOC and not playing anybody in the preseason, I have to respect it because it's the right thing to do. If I was buying tickets and I was in the stands, I would have much preferred Mike Zimmer because I would have seen a whole half of Kirk Cousins at times. But that game where Irv Smith Jr. got hurt in the final preseason game because Zimmer wasn't too happy with how they'd practiced. So he made everybody else, all the starters go out and play in a fourth preseason game. Oof. I mean, getting somebody hurt in that situation, I very much respect. It's the same thing goes for OTAs and minicamp with O'Connell, where as a reporter, I really enjoyed OTAs and minicamp when Zimmer would have those guys going at each other because we could watch and go, all right, well, this guy looks good and the offense is doing this and they're 11 on 11s out there. I mean, when Kirk Cousins famously threw the ball into the road in a minicamp practice, that was 11 on 11 and Zimmer was throwing blitzes at them and all sorts of different coverages. And that's what upset Cousins so much. That feels like a different universe from Kevin O'Connell. It's all walkthrough at 11 on 11. The only full speed stuff is 7 on a 7. And they have a rule that nobody hits the ground. Like nobody should ever be making physical contact with each other. But then again, you get to the end of last year, look at the Vikings roster. It's most of the guys, they're out there, they're healthy. So I respect and appreciate that they probably won't play McCarthy a lot in these preseason games. Kind of wish that they would so you guys could see him. And I think you'll get a little bit of both worlds. Son of a Beaver says, speaking of Sam Howell, if he does not prove that he's capable with the Vikings, look at Anthony Richardson, Joe Flacco, or CJ Beathard. You love CJ Beathard. You're going to have to explain that at some point. Beavers, Tyler Huntley, Carson Wentz. Yeah, I haven't seen Carson Wentz pop up anywhere. Is he playing this year? There was some fake news that he had retired. It was like an April Fool's thing, but maybe he is. I don't know. Did he sign somewhere? I don't remember if Wentz tell me if Wentz ended up somewhere. I don't remember if he did as a backup, but Tyler Huntley, it hasn't worked out for him. He played for Miami last year. It was pretty ugly. Started a playoff game that he lost because he fumbled at the goal line, and that was kind of his shining moment. Joe Flacco, maybe if they cut him, I think if you are Joe Flacco and you don't win that job, maybe you are asking to be cut and just go be a backup for a better team. That's possible. Anthony Richardson is one I just can't see him at any point anytime soon getting let go. They have to ride it out for the entire season because there's always a chance where you get 2/3 of the way through the season and you've been playing Daniel Jones. It's not really working. And you're like, all right, Anthony Richardson. Okay. Wentz hasn't signed. I didn't think so. I didn't see that pop up. But maybe Richardson kind of has it click. You're going to hold out for that because you've seen players like Richardson who were declared busts. Sam Darnold was one of them. And then all of a sudden, like it works. And who knows why, right? Richardson has just had so few reps in his career. Like, I just don't think he's going to be available. But those other guys, yeah, I mean, if they don't like what they've seen from Sam Howell, then yeah, you call Ryan Tannehill, you call Carson Wentz, you call maybe, I guess, CJ Beathard, but you call the Browns about Joe Flacco. Like, hey, if you guys are going to start Kenny Pickett, then we'll take him as the backup. I think they'll have options. And that's why when we were in the middle of that, who's going to be the backup quarterback conversation, I was like, they'll find somebody. And if it doesn't work out with that guy, they'll find somebody else. There's a number of quarterbacks out there that are possibilities. Now, Anthony Richardson to be the Vikings backup maybe 2 years from now. Now that one I could see happening. Track Pat says, who will have a better year this year, McCarthy or Darnold? That's an interesting question. I mean, because Seattle has enough to be competitive. I don't think they have enough to be a serious contender, but Darnold just showed last year that he can really play in the NFL. Clint Kubiak is his offensive coordinator. Has that ever really worked? In 2021, the Vikings had an okay offense under Clint Kubiak, but it was not great. And they really struggled late in games. It seemed to adjust. Then again, he was working for Mike Zimmer. That's a tough gig. And last year he was having to start Spencer Rattler. Not exactly, a good gauge on how good Clint Kubiak is as an offensive coordinator. They gave away DK Metcalf, but they have Jackson Smith, the Jigba. They brought in Cooper Kupp. I don't know how healthy he's going to be. Their offensive line kind of stinks. Like all these things. I mean, we've seen from Sam Darnold that what's around him is going to play a large role in how good he's going to be. So I think that Darnold will have a year where he throws for a lot of yards and he's a lot of fun and he makes a lot of mistakes and he probably runs like a 9-8 team. When I was working on my predictions, my 50 bold predictions the other day, I wrote down 4,500 yards and 9 wins for Sam Darnold. So I think that he could end up with fantasy stats. Like if you're a fantasy player and you're asking me Darnold or McCarthy, I might say Darnold because he might rack up more yards. They might play in more shootouts. I don't know how good that defense is in Seattle, and it might be a really good statistical season for him. But does that mean that they're going to win a lot of games and be that competitive? And we know that Darnold is going to make his fair number of mistakes. And when he did it last year, he had a top 5 defense to bail him out, like in Jacksonville, and a great kicker, John Parker Romo, that day. But is he going to have that in Seattle if he throws 3 interceptions all in the red zone? Probably not. So I think JJ McCarthy is going to lead a more successful team and possibly even a more successful offense in terms of total points. But I think that Darnold will end up racking up more of your traditional stats. So maybe that's a cop-out answer, but I think that that's probably how it plays out. Is at the end of the year, we might say, well, McCarthy threw for 700 less yards, but we're like old enough now and we understand stats well enough now to not look at total yards as a great way to evaluate a quarterback. So, yeah, I mean, if you're asking also who ranks higher by PFF at the end of the year or ESPN's QBR, like those catch-all stats, I would probably say Sam Darnold, but I don't know if it's going to be by a lot, and I don't know that his team is going to win more. Bruno says, how do you think Brian Flores will use Dallas Turner this year? I think he will use Dallas Turner in a lot of different ways. It won't be, unless somebody gets hurt, then he'll have to fill into somebody's role. But let's just assume everyone's healthy. That's how we do it on June 26th. You got Grenard and Van Ginkel, who are pretty locked into what their roles are. But what you can do with Van Ginkel is you can adjust that ever so slightly to where he can play middle linebacker a little bit more. You can also look at both of those guys and say, do you really want 900 plus snaps for Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel like last year? They were both in the top 5 in total snaps. And when you get to the end of the season and you're playing in the playoffs and you're flying to Glendale, Arizona to play the Rams, is that good? Is it good to go into the playoffs with so many games where Jonathan Grenard was exhausted by the end? I mean, you remember the Vikings calling a timeout just to get Grenard enough of a breather to get him back out there in a big moment. I think they would much rather have Grenard play like 750 snaps and Van Ginkel 700 snaps and have Dallas Turner take up a large portion of the other one. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's rushing off the left side and the right side. I also wouldn't be surprised that in certain packages, he's playing an inside linebacker type of situation. You know, Dallas Turner kind of reminds me of what everyone wanted Anthony Barr to be. When Anthony Barr came into the NFL, he was thought of after his first year where he made a lot of splash plays as this dynamo who could play off the edge, in the middle, could line up anywhere, do anything. And as the years went along, he kind of settled into more of a traditional like inside linebacker position. You know, one of the 2 linebackers with Eric Hendricks in the nickel package, which they played pretty much exclusively. And he was good in that role. He was very good in that role. But he never turned into that freak show off the edge guy who could do all sorts of stuff. That wasn't him. I think that could be Dallas Turner. It's also because Mike Zimmer played a 4-3, and it was a very traditional kind of 4-3, and he had the horses to do it in 17, 18, 19. And Barr was just fitting into a traditional type of linebacker spot. Whereas Brian Flores, there's no tradition. It's just whatever works the best for that player at that time. And for Dallas Turner, that might be a lot of different things. And I think that's one reason why they took it so slowly for Turner last year was because they wanted to train him to do a lot of different stuff. And yeah, you could just throw him out there and say, all right, dude, you're an edge rusher, just rush the passer. And let's make sure you get like 6 or 7 sacks so we look good for our first round draft pick. But that wasn't how they used him. I mean, they dropped him back over 100 times in coverage. They rushed him from different spots. I didn't love how he looked at inside linebacker, but they were trying things with him to see how it looked and to get him some experience doing it. So now he can do all those different things. And I've thought that Van Ginkel might get 4 or 5 less sacks this year and actually be more impactful or just as impactful because you can slide Turner over. A lot of times to create those sacks, they were using Van Ginkel kind of on stunts where he would line up outside, swing to the inside, or there was some cleanup sacks in there where Turner has the pure twitchiness where he could just beat somebody. You saw that against Chicago where he could just roast an offensive tackle, that it takes a little bit more effort for Andrew Van Ginkel. So he might play a little more in the linebacker position. There's so many things they could do. It's very fun to talk about because there's so many different things that they can do. Son of a Beaver says, when we signed Tim Jones during free agency, his one highlight was catching a 74-yard touchdown from CJ Beathard. It's a bit because we do not have a backup quarterback for a while. Okay, I did not realize that Tim Jones had caught a 74-yard touchdown from CJ Beathard. Well, that's some good tape analysis there from you, Mr. Beavers. But Tim Jones is another one that's not going to make the list. I was thinking about that today because I've got the top 10 now to count down and who did not make the list. And there's a lot of guys who might be intriguing in this camp that will have to show that they belong on the list. And I guess Tim Jones is one of them because I just don't really know what they've got there. He's been around a couple years. He's been a special teamer, but you never really know when someone's going to take that big step forward and emerge and surprise you. And through Vikings history, there have been quite a few of those. All right. Well, it looks like you guys are kind of running low on questions. I don't blame you for that. It is June 26th. I do have a bank of fans only questions to get to some more episodes of those. And I did an interview with Steve Palazzolo today. Make sure you go check that out. Really good stuff on some of my random predictions. Got a couple of guests coming up next week. Jeremiah Searles, I've been told, is begging to get back on the show and have some fun there. We got it. I mean, this weather has been such trash. It's either been 95 degrees or raining. How am I going to get the porch podcast going? Am I going to play guitar for everyone this summer? I'll try. I'll try to get it set up to be able to do that. My guitar stuff is upstairs. I'm not trying to bail on you guys. I just haven't figured out how am I going to mic that up? How am I going to make that work to do it and when? But you know what? You do have me on that. We are at the time of year where I probably should figure that out because, we got time. We have time as there's how many days left? Maybe 25 days left until training camp. We'll get there. The position that needs more depth, cornerback or O-line. I mean, cornerback is the one that I think is the most clear, is the easiest one. And I've been trying to think about the other positions because we just have spent so much time on the corners and the shortage of depth. And that really depends on Dwight McGlothern. And it really depends on Jeff Okudah, because if those guys are good, then you don't really need a lot of depth. And if they're not, then you've got problems. Offensive line, I think they have good depth. I think they have some of the best depth in the NFL at the offensive line position. And that's, not a high bar because most teams do not. But if you could trust Justin School for 4 games and you could trust, Blake Brandel for 4 games, I mean, you're in good shape there. And I'm really interested to see Michael Juergens, Walter Rouse. Walter Rouse was good last year in training camp and preseason. He really showed something. So is he somebody that is a long-term swing tackle option? Could he bump into guard a little bit? I was not looking close enough to see if he took any sort of slow reps at guard, but I don't think that's a really good way to look at it in OTAs and minicamp. But training camp, it will be if he takes any of those. And Juergens is an interesting player because he beat out a veteran backup for the number 2 center job last year, and they're trusting him if Ryan Kelly gets hurt. I think they are pretty solid at that position, and the corner is a little more dicey. I think that the weakest position depth-wise is actually outside linebacker edge, because I'm counting Dallas Turner as a main guy. I'm counting him as more of a starter. We may see him start some games, get the official start. I'm counting him as more of a starter, and then behind him, that's where it's the Gabe Murphys, the the Bo Richters, the Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, and there's nobody back there where you can go, all right, look, this guy's been around a long time. He's going to be fine. He's going to get you some sacks and that kind of stuff. There's no guy that's that like that that's proven behind those three starters. That might actually be the position that has the least depth. I really liked getting Eric Wilson to give the linebacker position a little bit more there. We know running back. If you've got two, you've got depth. Wide receiver, they've got three, but after that there isn't a lot of proven. So, but you got to look kind of hard to find where they don't have depth on this roster. I need an iRig for guitar. Okay, I haven't heard of that iRig. I'm gonna have to look it up. All I have, what I have upstairs, I don't have a big, six Marshall stacks like Slash or something. I have, a Fender amp, and I've got my Mac upstairs, and it's hooked into GarageBand, and I play and record some stuff into that. I got a keyboard that I can barely play, and use the drum machine on the program. So, it's not the most spectacular rig, but I would guess I could probably just bring the amp downstairs and set it up near the microphone. You guys would be able to at least hear it, or like jack it up super loud. I don't know. We'll figure it out. I'll do it. I'll do it at some point. We'll figure it out. Purple Hef says, you think JJ McCarthy is going to have designed run plays this year? I was thinking about this last year during the playoffs with running quarterbacks, because I think in the year 2025, when you look around and you go, all right, well, there's some guys who don't use their legs at all, like a Justin Herbert or a Jordan Love, when they really could. They have the athleticism to do it, but they just kind of don't. I mean, are you getting enough there on third down scrambles? Are you getting enough from the designed run game that actually might cause some problems? Even if you're not doing it all the time, shouldn't you be doing it some of the time? And with JJ McCarthy, I can imagine if you're Kevin O'Connell, where you'd be like, look, I'm not running JJ McCarthy, because if he gets hurt, then we're in trouble. But at the same time, it's pretty clear, if you have a quarterback as an element of the run game, just how much that impacts the defense, because then they have to pay attention to the quarterback as well. Can you do it enough? And I don't think they'll do it at all. Like, they didn't really do it with Josh Dobbs. And if they didn't do it with Josh Dobbs, and I know those plays weren't in the playbook, but you could try. If they didn't do it with Josh Dobbs, I can't see them doing it with JJ McCarthy. I would like to have some element of it. I just don't think that that's in KOC's DNA, which is ironic, because he was a running quarterback himself. CJ says, crystal ball. Vikings are a wild card team. What is their seed? Where are they playing? How far does Riker line up with a chance to have to win? I could see them being a 5 seed and playing against, if I want to make this spicy, I could just say playing in Philadelphia. How about playing in DC? How about that? If they are a wild card team, 5 seed, playing Washington, D.C. in Jaden Daniels, and maybe they win 11 games. That's where I've got them right now, 11 games. If the Lions win 12, that, puts you in a wild card, but a high wild card seed. And I could absolutely see Washington hosting a playoff game with Jaden Daniels. How far does Reichard line up? I don't know, 40, 45 yards. I'm not going to say the number that, has happened maybe in the playoffs before for the Vikings. But I could see that scenario. One question I get a lot is, if the Vikings make the playoffs and they win a wild card round game, is it a success for this season? So if they were a wild card team and they went to Washington, they beat the Commanders 27-24 on a walk-off Will Reichard field goal, does that make the season a success? And my answer is, it kind of depends on how it looks. Because if it's the scenario that I just laid out, which is 11 wins, and you go to Washington and you feel like you're even with them, just as good, you win that game against one of the best young quarterbacks in the league, like, you're going to feel really good. That means McCarthy played really well. But if you back into a wild card spot, 9-8, McCarthy hasn't played that well. You've won some games with defense, grinded some games out, and then Jaden Daniels gets hurt or something, and you pull out a wild card win. Like, all these things are a moving target. And there's lots of teams that you could use as an example of this, of like the Texans last year. They won a wild card game. Were they a success? I don't think so. How about the Giants under Brian Dable? They gave him coach of the year and they beat the Vikings in the playoffs, but they went and got trounced. And what happens the next week matters a lot too. If the Vikings went 9-8 and they won a playoff game 13-9 and the opposing quarterback got hurt and then you got killed in the next round, I don't know. Like, I don't know if that's really a great season. There's a lot of this that cannot just be static. It can't just be in a vacuum of if they do this, then they do, then it's a success, then it's a failure. It has to be a lot of how it feels and it has to be a lot of how it looks. Because if it looks like JJ McCarthy is that dude going forward and they lose on a missed field goal in the playoffs, that would never happen to this team. But if it did in some crazy world, well, you're going to say that was a success. I mean, think about even 2015. I think 2015 was a success for the Vikings. They should have won the playoff game. Teddy Bridgewater, you came out of that season feeling like he could lead a winning team. You thought you're on the rise. So how it feels walking away from it last year, walking away from it, it all just was, I guess that was fake the whole time, which it wasn't. They were a really good team that had the wrong matchup and they choked. Everybody did. Everybody did. And it was a successful season last year, even the way that it ended, because Kevin O'Connell proved that he could coach and he can raise the level of a quarterback. And McCarthy developed behind Sam Darnold, even if he didn't get to play, but you didn't ruin him or anything by starting him too early and having problems. Like, they stayed to their path, which was probably always to play him in 2025. They developed a lot of players, the guys emerged, or even if they didn't develop them, they understood how good they really were. Like, I thought that, Jonathan Grenard was good. I didn't know Jonathan Grenard was great. Just for example, like, a lot of that happened last year. And the same for Van Ginkel, the same for Cashman. Like, a lot of players emerged. And that's a successful season because it swings you forward into 2025, gives you confidence in where they're going. That's a success. But I mean, if they lose in the first round this year, that's a lot harder because if you have 3 years of Kevin O'Connell winning in the regular season and losing in the first round of the playoffs, it just starts to build up in the same way that it has in some other markets. Like, Green Bay's probably tired of that. Pittsburgh's probably tired of that. Then, it starts to add up. But if they were to go, 9-8 and right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. CJ is right. 9-8 and barely winning and then losing in the divisional round. You feel like, I don't know, was that really what you were looking for? Probably not. So it all depends on how it looks. If you blast some team in the wild card and barely lose in the divisional round, well, come on. I mean, that's a good season then. So there's a lot of different kind of trees to that, a lot of different routes and paths to that opinion. Reconnected says if Addison is suspended 2 to 3 games, who decides which games he misses, the team or the league? That would be the league. As soon as you're suspended, you're suspended. I mean, as soon as it comes down, like you're out, like the next game. They don't get to pick. That would be great for the team, is to say, you know what? Giants, missed that one. Cleveland missed that. That'd be great if they could do that. Unfortunately, whenever it comes down is when it is. The one thing that's a little bit tricky is you don't know when it's going to come down. I saw Ben Gessling had something on this the other day about how, I think it was how many days later the last suspension came after a ruling. I think it was, maybe he had something like 20 days after. The NFL will look at it after the court ruling and then they'll decide. And as soon as they decide, then that's the suspension. So if they're messing around and haven't figured it out, and then in week 5, they decide we're ruling, he's out week 6, 7, 8. It's not the best for planning, but that is often how it goes. In this scenario, it should be clarified soon. And then it'll likely be games 1, 2, 3, which they need to win. Beaver, son of Beavers. Do you have any thoughts on the colluding of the NFL teams to not fully guarantee contracts? It seems JC Treader also tried to hide the report. Yeah. Well, number one, on this here program, I probably have made fun of that like 50 times because everyone with half a brain cell knew that the NFL was colluding against Lamar Jackson. So I'm not surprised that Pablo Torre would dig up this report that has all sorts of evidence that they were colluding against quarterbacks to try to lower the amount of guaranteed dollars, and that they were celebrating with each other when they got good contracts that pushed down that number from Deshaun Watson, and that they were all very angry with Cleveland because Watson set the bar. None of that surprises me. And I mean, Lamar Jackson, you were talking about the MVP of the league, one of the best players ever in the NFL, ever. And you're telling me that nobody was interested? I mean, the Falcons leaked right away. No, 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 we're not interested. Oh, great stuff, Falcons. As if you were in great shape with Desmond Ritter. I saw that the other day from a Falcons writer. It was D. Orlando Ledbetter, who's covered them for a long time, was like, yeah, they went with Desmond Ritter instead of pursuing Lamar Jackson, and they were the most obvious team to go after him. But even the Minnesota Vikings, we talked about it, and there was one report that was connecting that situation with Lamar Jackson with the Vikings, if I recall, or at least there was something involving it, because I remember doing a show and debating it with people and being like, guys, this is Lamar Jackson. Like, you want him on your football team. Uh, so nothing surprises me about that. I think JC Treader should probably resign. I mean, if you just look at some of the things that were said in that report, he doesn't really seem fit to run the NFLPA. That should be easy based on some of the things that came out, and also that they haven't been able to fight back well enough against this because the owners successfully were able to push down those contracts. And you would have thought that the players would want to be the first ones out there who were telling the world that the owners were doing this, and instead it just got shoved under the rug, which to me was maybe trying to save face for JC Treader. The other part of this, though, that I think, and I've seen Mike Florio saying, like, why isn't anybody talking about this? And there's been very little discussion on the major networks about it. And the answer is probably because everyone knew it already. And I don't know what you're supposed to do about it. I mean, he got a contract eventually with the Ravens. NFL play. I mean, look, collusion is bad. No one wants this. You shouldn't do it. At the same time, when you have a quarterback in the league like Dak Prescott who's got 60 million bucks and he fought like crazy for it, are any of us going, "Oh, how will they're going to be okay?" Right? I mean, I think that's why. And I don't totally subscribe to that. This is a different world that's in its own bubble for the universe. I mean, you have people who are struggling to survive, and NFL quarterbacks making 60 million a year, and it's just not a just society when it comes to that. But like, put that all aside, it's hard, I think, for people to look at players and quarterbacks who are making this much money and just feel bad for them that their owners were trying to push the prices down. And the owners always try to push the prices down, whether they talk about it with each other or not. So I would be very surprised if any of this moves the needle with anybody. The other thing is, too, that every major network, they have NFL rights. They know how popular it is. That's a boat you really don't want to rock too much when it comes to those owners. I just don't think that there's a lot that's going to come from this other than, oh, yeah, that thing that was happening, it was happening. And hey, all you teams that didn't break rank and go get Lamar Jackson, good stuff. If you're a fan of one of those teams, you should be infuriated. If you're the Atlanta Falcons, you should be like, what? The owner was 80 years old. Like, who cares if everyone's mad at him? Go get Lamar Jackson. But yeah, I mean, for something to pop up like that at this time of year is, it catches your eye for sure. But when it came out, did anyone go, oh my, I'm shocked. I'm shocked. No, definitely not. So, all right. Good stuff. Good stuff. I'll try to work on the plans to play guitar on the show at some point. And until then, though, Monday night, Maggie Robinson returns Monday night. She has moved into Syracuse University, intern Maggie, and she'll be ready to talk some football again. And we'll start to do some of them predictions, I'm thinking, unless some news pops up. But at this time of year, you always root against news coming out with the Minnesota Vikings. So we'll continue to count down the most interesting players heading into training camp next week as well, probably next Thursday. and also start to make some predictions. And I can't wait to find out what your guys are as well, your guys' bold predictions. So thanks everybody for stopping by, and we'll talk to y'all again very soon. Football.